I believe anti-Semitism is the lazy route. It's a
Yeah.
very, very lazy route of assigning collective guilt to the Jews.
Mm,
When you're gonna be intelligent about something, it requires critical thinking, it requires research, it requires facts, it requires
mm.
nuance, but anti-Semitism relies on stereotypes,
Oof.
conspiracy theories, scapegoating. It contradicts history and reason. Where did this go wrong? Why would you take a democratic ally like Israel and turn against her inside the UN? Well, let's take it back to a spiritual issue, Tinashe. When you do
Please.
that, when you do that, let's
Yeah.
understand God made it very clear. Those who curse Israel, I'm going to curse. Well, what is the curse? What does that curse mean? Well, it means that you get to go into blind deception.
First and foremost, I want to welcome everybody to a very special guest. I feel like, Heather, you are a godsend
Mm,
because there are questions that I have been looking to answer as far as my own research goes. And
mhm,
I sort of already feel like I have answers to, but yet experientially, I know that I don't have the same level of insight that somebody like yourself would have.
mm,
Right? And so having you sort of find your way into this ecosystem has been an absolute blessing. So
mhm,
for the folks at home, Heather Johnson is the CEO and one of the founders of an organization that essentially sets up the trips. The infamous trips to the wall is how like the Groypers know it, right? It's the infamous trips of essentially our congressmen and women making their way over to Israel and getting a real perspective on what's
mhm,
actually going on as opposed to getting it from the internet somewhere.
mhm.
And so I want to welcome you. Thank you very much for having us, Heather.
Thank you, Tinashe. Glad to be here.
Oh, and it's gonna be an interesting journey because I have so many questions for you from so many different perspectives. But before we get into that, I kind of want to know, how did you get into this space? Like, when did you get to caring about this relationship between the United States and Israel?
Well, we've been involved, my husband and I, for the last 28 years, so a very,
Wow.
very long time, and I think
Mm,
we made our kind of first trip to Israel at the time when, the Jews were coming in from all quarters of the world, and the Ben
mm,
Gurion Airport was just loaded with immigrants coming into Israel, and particularly from the Baltic countries and the Soviet Union, the former Soviet
mm,
Union, and so it was just a trigger as you
mm.
would understand some of the unfolding prophecies over the nation of
Yeah.
Israel and how God anticipated modern Israel and that those prophecies would unfold. And then further to that, I think
Yeah.
we just understood from God that He wanted us to participate. He wanted us to cooperate with Him
Mm.
at a
Wow.
time when Israel was regathering, and it was and the Gentiles were supposed to be a part of that. In
Absolutely.
those days and at that time, says Isaiah 49:11, I will beckon to the Gentiles. I'll lift a banner to the nations. They're going to carry you, Israel. They're going to put your daughters on their shoulders, your sons into their arms. In other words, they're going to become your vital support. And I
Yeah.
still believe that that passage fulfilled. I believe that's exactly what happened. So many from around
Mm.
the world, parliaments and leaders, and the cacophony of
Mm.
Gentile believers around the world and even Gentile not believers
Yeah.
certainly corresponded to the founding of the modern state of Israel and a lot of those prophecies that unfolded and getting Israel back into the land.
This is so good already. I'm so glad we started in scripture because this is the foundation, right?
Mhm,
If we're
mhm,
to understand whether it is the relationship that we have or on the other side, which is, the utter, well, we'll call it what it is, demonic attack against the Jewish people and Israel overall, right? Not
mhm,
even questioning whether or not this is true Israel, but now just the eradication of the Jewish people.
mhm,
We
mhm,
live in this extremely polarized world. And so to
mhm,
know that you came into it with scripture at the
mhm,
basis and more specifically with prophecy at the core is foundational for me. Because, when the outer world is seeing these trips that are really educational experiences, right? A true
mhm,
tactile understanding of what Israel is. which for
Mhm.
me only makes sense, especially when you're in a climate where everybody has an opinion about a place they've never been and a
Mhm.
people they've never engaged with, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so here we have, the likes of mostly Gen Z and now creeping into Alpha, which is this idea that, well, this is just another example of Jewish money influencing American politics. But yet
Mhm.
to know your heart is in scripture, and
Mhm.
it's like, where am I coming from? Well, what does God say about the matter?
Mhm.
I think that's
Yeah.
such an important place to start. And so I want to get a little deeper into that conversation of prophecy. Did you grow up just knowing like eschatology was just a part of the household or what?
Well, I actually grew up, and I think more importantly to state, I grew up in a church that was very much replacement theology.
Wow.
I had never understood modern Israel and its
Mm,
importance. That, in the most real sense, replacement theology sort of takes the church of today
yeah.
um, and replaces it with Israel. And so
Mhm.
somehow along the way, Israel, according to replacement theology, Israel sinned a divine covenant away. And therefore, the new group that's in is the church, and they are the
Mhm.
administrators of God's presence on earth. And that's why one of the reasons we have a center for a major, major denomination called Rome. We have Italy, we've got a
Hmm.
Catholic church
Yeah.
that espouses Rome as the center of things. And so it's a reflection on a long history
Mhm.
of replacement theology and the understanding that Israel broke a covenant and therefore does not have a place. They get to wander the earth. God did not look at it that way. When He made a
That's right.
promise to Abraham, as you know, Tinashe,
Mm,
it was an eternal
absolutely.
covenant. It
That's
was
right.
irrevocable. It was
Yeah.
outside space and time.
That's
It
right.
had a governing role in every covenant that would come after it, including the new covenant, which is a subset of that
Mm,
eternal covenant where God said, I'm going to give you land
that's
eternally.
right.
I'm going to give you people, and I'm going to
Mhm.
cause you to be the blessing for the nations. That is, you're going to
Amen.
facilitate and broker into the world the spiritual blessings for all people. Well, the Jews
Mm,
indeed did that. They
yeah.
indeed brought the Messiah. They brought the
Yeah.
apostles. They
Mm,
brought the gospel to the ends of the earth. A remnant of Jews
absolutely.
did that. It wasn't
That's
Christians.
right. That's
So we
right.
have to understand that while people mean well and they want to take a proper approach to theology, to discount an eternal covenant is a false foundation.
Ooh wee. Okay, she came with it today. Heather, we're gonna get into it. We're gonna have some fun. So, you grow up in this, well, essentially in supersessionism, is what the
Mhm, mhm,
the theologians like to refer to. But in essence, it is really the belief that God breaks his promises and that
mhm.
God can't be trusted with his promises, right? That's really how I see it at its fundamental sort of level. And so how do you break out of that? Because, we're oftentimes in the Western church fed this idea that all of this is about you, right? Everything you're reading is you as a Gentile, right? As the quote
Mhm.
unquote church or the gentilized church. So, how do you break out of that mentality growing up in it? Did you already see cracks in the seams? Are you reading your scripture thinking, how
Yeah.
does this make sense without
Well,
Israel?
yeah. Well, I think that for the first and foremost, the blaring reality is that there's a
Mm.
modern Israel today. After
Oh, yeah, that'll
2,000
do it.
years after
Right.
2,000 years, there's not a Roman Empire anymore. No British Empire, no
Mm.
Byzantine Empire, and 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 no Persian Empire, but
Yeah.
there is this group called the Jews that are living back in their land,
Mhm.
rebuilding their cities, living in the anticipated prophecies that would happen in a particular generation, which so happens to be ours. And so I
Mm.
think that was the first and most blaring thing. It's just the
Yeah.
discovery and the understanding of how these prophecies have unfolded in our time. So,
Hmm.
and then it leads to that notion, how do I participate? So getting
That's right.
getting involved, you just get more and more and more understanding. And that for your audience is important to know
Yeah.
is to get involved with Israel, to understand what's
Mhm.
going on, to step into a practical role of intercession or caring or reading, becoming a watchman, as David said, on the walls of Jerusalem. It
Wow.
brings with it a deep understanding of what God is doing today.
Yeah.
It's his major move on the earth today. Well, the second thing that did it for me was I just
Yeah.
stopped spiritualizing every verse of the Bible to myself.
I
That
love it.
is, prophecies that belong to Israel were for
Yeah.
Israel. And
Hmm.
while I might say, "Yeah, my marriage it's become it's like the land that burst into bloom, and now, it's a garden," and all of that kind of thing. You know how we try to apply these prophecies to the
Absolutely,
land that
yeah.
Israel saw? And I stopped doing that. And I
You're
just
bringing
began
the
to
kingdom in your own personal, marriage, yeah.
Yes. Well, if
This is
you
the
only
kingdom.
ever spiritualize the Bible to yourself, you will certainly
Mm,
miss Israel.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so, you've now had kind of a cross-generational understanding,
Mhm,
and being somebody who's been involved intimately with Israel and seeing where the sentiment has gone, and of course, as they say, it's the oldest hatred literally in the book, right? In human history, in essence. It begins with, I believe, the promise or the covenant that was made
mhm.
between man and that old serpent, right?
Yeah.
As far as they will come one through this
Mm,
one who
mhm.
will crush your head.
Yes.
That's God's first promise as far as
Mhm,
fulfillment goes. And so you come from seeing things playing. I mean, again, you obviously are more consciously aware because you're there, you're involved, you want to be involved. You're seeing the rest of the world who is seemingly ignorant, does not care. And now we're getting to a place where everybody cares, but it seems that most people have such a deep disdain and
mhm,
almost illogical hatred towards
mhm,
Israel and the Jewish people. Is this
mhm.
something that, though you are steeped in scripture, is it something that you are ready for? And as it's been unfolding, where's your own mindset been? You can include
Well,
October
I just
7th in
yeah,
there, etcetera.
absolutely, and I do think that, when you have a steady diet of social media and
Yeah.
you've got a steady diet of TikTok and everything that flashes before you during a war is
Mhm.
Israel equals genocide.
Mm.
And, Israel is an occupier. And
Yeah.
so this generation that would say maybe be less into their Bibles, less
Yeah.
knowledgeable, that's the refrain, and that's what people adopt as their truth.
Hmm.
I believe antisemitism is the lazy route. It's a
Yeah.
very, very lazy route of assigning
Absolutely.
collective guilt to the Jews.
Mm.
When you're gonna be intelligent about something, it requires critical thinking, it requires research, it requires facts, it requires
Mhm.
nuance, but antisemitism relies on stereotypes,
Oof.
conspiracy theories, scapegoating. It contradicts history and reason.
Mm.
It constantly and consistently falls apart even under just basic historical scrutiny about who
Yeah.
the Jews are, where they
Mhm.
belong, what their divine calling is. And so it is surged in societies where people are threatened or they feel threatened and
Yeah.
they look to blame.
Mhm.
So it's that's a little bit of that. I always assign anti-Semitism is a lack of intelligence. It's an
That's
intellectual failure.
absolutely. That's
It's
right.
not just biblical failure or a demonized perspective. It
Mm.
is an intellectual failure. It is a lazy route.
Mm. The old scapegoat. I mean,
Mhm.
if you can find one solution to every single problem in essence, then you found no solution at all,
Yeah.
unless it's Jesus. I
Mhm.
mean, unless you're going to the big T truth, you're absolutely on point. And in my own journey, because I am, I guess, confounding for most people. It's
Mhm.
obvious that this guy is paid off by some sort of organization. He's obviously Mossad.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
7K Club because I'm, young, black, seemingly to most black American, really African American, born and,
Mhm.
raised in Zimbabwe and then moved to the States at around 10. And so my story and a Gentile, my story doesn't necessarily make sense when it comes to having any sort of care, any sort of it, I think it's one thing to care and another thing entirely to be involved, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Because most people pretend to care in the age of social media. Everybody cares about everything for about 2.5 days and then
Mhm.
on to the next thing. And so for myself, I was one of those individuals who sort of head in the sand,
Mm.
um, which obviously then creates an obvious ignorance about things. And then when I started looking around me and I started seeing, kids around my age waving around these flags who had never mentioned anything about, interest in Middle Eastern geopolitics,
Mhm.
etc. None of this was ever in their psyche. I remember growing up with these same kids in the Bay Area, and all of a sudden, they're activists for this one specific cause. And
Mhm.
so, Heather, this is what led me down this sort of rabbit trail. And I found myself in a place where I am confronted by the facts, right? I don't necessarily have a hard stance one side or the other, but the more I look into it, the more obvious it's getting, especially
Mhm.
when it came to October 7th. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, I'm looking at it from a personal sort of
Mhm.
perspective. Somebody breaks into my house, they murder my kids, they take my wife captive. What's my next move?
Mhm.
Right? Oh, I'm supposed to sit back and take it. And then also, I am technically the victimizer. That's
Mhm.
how it looked to me. Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, again, obviously there's this massive gaslighting. But when I just left myself to researching individually, not yet getting into conversations, it seems so straightforward. But yet, as soon as I step out of that personal little bubble, all of a sudden I feel the pressures of, am I wrong here?
Mhm.
Or, because it seems like barely anybody else has come to the same conclusion with the very same facts presented.
Mhm.
And so, Heather, and I feel this is almost a therapy session of sorts because I don't necessarily get these conversations all the time in this sort of way,
Mhm.
right? To say, especially from a standpoint of those who are believers, to say, how did you get yourself to a place where you were so unapologetic about it?
Mhm.
In
Well,
spite of everybody else, including in the church, being opposed to your own stance.
yes. Well, I just think that, we are so engaged. I'm
Mhm.
bringing the senior members of Congress, to Israel once a year. I lead 3 or 4 tours to Israel every year. We
Wow.
have we have a leadership platform in the state of Israel that's the largest in the state of Israel on biblical heritage
Mm,
and identity. We've been there a long time to understand the facts on the ground. Again, it's
okay.
not all spiritual. It's
That's
very
right.
intellectual. It's a
Mm,
geopolitical situation. It's complicated, but it's not that complicated.
yeah.
Uh, and there's things that I know and have just through education and making myself look at things. I'm friends with Palestinians, very much so.
That's right.
I take the Congress over there, we
Mhm.
meet with the Palestinian business leaders. We go down to Hebron, the largest city for the Palestinian people, the business hub, and we meet with Palestinians. It's not like we're trying to be
Mm,
biased for Israel. It's putting your intellect to work and on the march to understand what some of these issues really mean. When you hear the word occupier, what does that mean? What is
yes.
that saying? And
Mm,
so when you don't investigate and you shrug it off and you just agree with a term like that, you're not very smart. And I think people have to
hmm.
understand and get inside of the facts on the ground to understand what is going on. So we take members of Congress through Judea and Samaria, which is where 80% of your
Mhm.
Bible took place. It's also the
That's right.
West Bank. It's where the Palestinians and Israelis live in a dotted Swiss cheese. And there's a lot to deal with there. Obviously, after an October 7th, who in the world do you trust? What
Right.
do you trust the Palestinians? You know,
Mm,
prior to October 7th, you had 150,000 Palestinians working in Israeli industrial parks. Everybody kind of, we
mm,
trusted each other. Not
yeah.
so today. No, no, no. There's none of that. And so or very little of it. And so there's just a way the way forward, Israel has to, in order to exist, they have to consider their neighbors an existential threat until
Yeah.
they are not. that they
Hmm.
have the power to bring incredible harm. And so,
Hmm.
how then do you live? How do you want this to end up? Well, there's going to have to be measures of conciliation from the Palestinian Authority. And if they can't do it, then that regime is going to fall, probably like the
Right.
Iranian regime is going to fall. We're going to
Absolutely.
watch the demise and the full fallout of the Palestinian Authority that has done
Hmm.
nothing but stalk that area, be terrorists. They've never aspired to a state. They've only ever, aspired to the destruction of Israel. You just go read their history. Just read a
Hmm.
little bit of history, and you'll understand that the Palestinian Authority is a terrorist organization,
That's
not
right.
to be trusted. That's why the nations don't trust them. That's why the United States has bankrupted them. We don't put money there. We don't, and there's a reason why. That's our leadership. So, and Europe is doing the same thing. Well, all of this is important to know, Tinashe, and it just
Yeah.
takes a little bit of research to understand it. I would say above every other nation on the face of the earth today, outside your own, for which you need it to be a noble patriot, you
Right.
need to understand modern Israel today. Every
Hmm.
believer needs to understand it. It is in our Bible from start to finish. The
That's
whole
right.
history, the whole future is going to culminate on how the nations handle Israel. You're going to want to know
Mm.
and be active in your understanding of that.
Yeah, well, we're definitely in a place of Israel acting as a cup of drunkenness right now.
Mhm,
Because, as you mentioned, whether it is European nations or others who would have been true allies in times past, and of course, these have been complex relationships, but it seems like there is a neglect and almost abandoning of Israel.
mhm,
And in some cases, especially in Europe, where I've gotten to spend a relative Um, quite a bit amount of time, like enough to understand what's going on the ground here in the
mhm,
hub of the
mhm.
EU. It is incredible to me how yesterday's friend is today's enemy, right?
Yes.
And all in the name of social justice. And so
Mhm,
I want to delve a little more into this conversation of the victimhood of Palestinians or Gazans,
mhm,
right? And I oftentimes use quotes for Palestinians not to dehumanize, but because if you know a little bit of the history, what
mhm,
is a Palestinian state?
mhm,
What is a Palestinian people? We have to go back to the origins of, is it Egyptians, Jordanians, etc.
mhm,
But there has been a narrative that it has been incredibly effective, and I got to give credit where credit is due, Heather, as far as this idea that the Palestinian people, including Hamas, who is their, militant arm, are
mhm,
the victims. And so,
mhm.
can you give us some insight into how that played out?
Yes. Well, you can remember, if you look back at history, Israel
Hmm.
withdrew from the Gaza Strip back in 2005, and there the twain have met. There's not been a single Israeli living there since 2005. So the wild notion that Hamas can claim that Israel are occupiers of that area is
Yeah.
absolutely false. It's false
Mm.
intellectually. Okay, it's just not true. So Israel wrongly withdrew. They should not have done that because in
Yeah.
doing so, the moment they left, as predicted, Hamas, as a terrorist organization whose motto, whose complete mission is the destruction of Israel,
Yeah.
began to build their terror network for 310 miles underground. That's where they spent all of Qatar's money, Turkey's money, the money coming from Iran, and all of this international community contributed to the buildup of this terror infrastructure inside the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, the
Mm.
Palestinian Authority inside the West Bank is supportive of Hamas. They are two different entities, but
Mhm.
nevertheless operating under the same um, um, stratosphere, the same
Right.
vision,
Yeah.
destruction of Israel. So you have to understand that. What do they want in a Palestinian state? Well, they claim that they want sovereignty, that they want freedom, that they want schools for their children. They want all of this sense of autonomy. But do they really? Do
Yeah.
they really? Because with all of the largesse of funding that has come in from the nations, per capita, the Palestinian people have received billions and billions of dollars from international community. Have they ever built a new kindergarten inside of Hebron? Have they ever shown a remote sign of wanting a state? If you're gonna build a state, you move toward building a state. That's what
Absolutely.
Israel did it. They
Mhm.
came in, they were defeated. They came in with the bags. All they didn't have any furniture. They had nothing. They came in and they showed the self determination. We're going to build a state. They begin to
Mm,
work toward that effort. Has the Palestinian Authority, has Hamas ever shown any interest in having a state? The answer is no. Have they
Right.
ever conceded to one iota of anything that Israel has put on the table? The answer is no.
Yeah.
And so that is where it lies today. Is, do you believe the Palestinian Authority? Do you believe Hamas has the best in mind for the Palestinian people? The answer is no. And the
mm,
Palestinian people understand that. They would give anything to be out from underneath the Palestinian Authority. Many Palestinians are victims today. They want
mm,
their families to prosper. They're a new generation. They don't want to be refugee status.
mm.
They don't wanna live like that. And so the only way to know that is to go interview them, spend time. Well, that's what we
Yeah.
have done. We've taken
Mm,
Congress there to do that specific thing, to meet with the people on the ground and to understand where people are. Well,
Yeah.
that's the situation. It is as sad as it is in Iran, as you watch
mm.
30,000 people killed in 2 days. That's what it's like to live under these regimes. They're brutal. They're brutal.
So, Heather, how do we get to a place where many of my generation have this perception of Hamas as the resistance?
Mhm.
How do we get to a place where a clear terrorist organization, as you said, they have this mission statement of from the river to the sea, which is the
Yep,
complete annihilation of the
of
Jewish
Israel.
people,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
How do we get to a place where most of my generation, I don't know if it was a Pew Research or one of these large polling organizations, but they came out with the numbers not too long ago. It was, I think, maybe 2 weeks after October 7th.
mhm.
And it was above 50% of Gen Z who believed that Hamas was not only justified, but that they should finish the job.
Yes, and thank you
How
for
do we
saying.
get there? Of
Yeah,
course, because that's
yeah,
the reality.
yes. Well, again, a steady diet on TikTok will lead you straight to that direction.
Yeah.
A steady diet on social media with these flashpoints, and you get a 30-second, window in, and, 1,000 people died in Gaza. Well,
Mm.
that steady diet leads you to that fallacy. It'll
Who's
lead.
pushing this? Who is supplying? Who is who's the chef? Because we hear on one side that, well, there are
Mhm,
well-meaning, whether it's
mhm,
governments and then
mhm.
therefore their own media arms, etc. But I can't help to believe that there are nefarious actors in this thing,
Oh, yeah. No, I just
right?
think
That there's pure
have a
propaganda.
exactly. I think some of the wealthiest nations on the earth today contribute to this narrative. You've
Mm.
got, and let's move away from the Arab world, which
Yeah.
contributes heartily to this with billions of dollars in play for media, okay?
Mm.
Let's set that aside. Then you move
Okay.
over to Europe that has
Mhm.
continued to stand in the UN against the state of Israel. The UN resolutions that come out are European led, Islamic led. And
Yeah.
so we continue to see that baffling sense of, where did this go wrong? Why would you take a democratic ally like Israel and turn against her inside the UN? Well, let's take it back to a spiritual issue, Tinashe. When you do
Please.
that, when you do that, let's
Yeah.
understand, God made it very clear. Those who curse Israel, I'm going to curse. Well, what is the curse?
Absolutely.
What does that curse mean? Well, it means
Mm.
that you get to go into blind deception. That's where we
Mm.
are. That's where people go. That's where whole nations go under
Yeah.
leadership that continues to press against Israel. And people are like, well, that is a radical view, Heather. Really? Is it
Yeah.
radical? Is it if you are a
Mhm.
Bible believing person with a biblical worldview? Can you take seriously what God has said that the nation that will not support you, Israel, will perish and be utterly destroyed? Isaiah
Yeah.
60, 10, and 11. Let me go over that with you, Tinashe.
Please. Please, let's get into it.
Foreigners will rebuild your walls, O Israel. Their
Mm.
kings will serve you. Though in anger I struck you, with great compassion I will bring you back. Back where? Back
Yeah.
into the land, so that men may bring you the wealth of the nations. Their kings will come in procession to you. For the nation,
Mm.
for the nation that will not support you will perish and be utterly destroyed. Isaiah 60, verses 10 and 11. Now, that's as clear as
Hmm.
day, but that's not
That's
the
right.
only place. That's not the only place. We go back to the original charter that God made with
Mhm.
Abraham. Those who curse you, I'm going to curse. Those who bless you, I'm going to bless. People don't
Yeah.
like that. God choosing a little group of people over here, setting
That's
up
right.
high above everybody else, and calling the nations to bless that particular people, that they are set apart. But God did that. He set them
Yeah.
apart. They carried with great suffering the
Yeah.
prophecies, the theology, even the understanding of God today. We can look to the Jewish people, to Yahweh, to a singular God that we all
Absolutely.
worship today. Thank goodness for
That's
the
right.
Jews. We go back to them. They brought forth the temple, the prophets, the
Mhm.
glory of God. They revealed the worship of God, the anticipation of a Messiah. They are due the honor that God requested of us, that He
Amen.
mandates from every believer.
It's so interesting because this morning I'm having a conversation about what were the nations doing while Israel was carrying that mantle, right? Throughout history. What were we doing? We were worshiping trees
Right.
and, and bronze. And
Exactly.
we,
Exactly.
it's like, many people are offended because, first and foremost, where's our story here? And I say, well,
Yes.
the nations are the ones who were grafted in. But beforehand, we had no knowledge of Yahweh. We didn't even
Yes.
want him in our consciousness.
Yeah.
We were
Yes.
filled with our sin and iniquity and couldn't even
Yes.
recognize it as such. And so here is God creating a nation where there was no nation out of a barren womb, out of the smallest remnant, and he always works with those remnants, right?
Mhm.
Out of the runt of the litter. And, this analogy that I oftentimes use is okay, let's say you're working at a job and your boss asks you, are you willing to take on 5 to 10 times the workload and
Mm,
responsibility? And if you do the same thing your coworkers do, you're going to get a more severe punishment. Now, you're going to be placed in this special position, but this
mm,
is the requirements. Oh, also, you're not necessarily getting paid more.
mhm.
How many people are willing to take that, Heather?
Mhm.
And so when it comes to this thing of, and I believe it's just purebred pride, it is the original sin, Lucifer's sin itself. I will raise myself up like the Most High.
Mhm.
We want to be the center of the story when it's all said and done. It's really about Yeshua, the
Yes.
Jewish Messiah brought through the Jewish
Mm,
people
mhm.
for the salvation of all mankind.
Yes.
And so, taking it back with this theological aspect, can you even also delve into, before I forget, I believe it's Joel 3, as far as the division of the land?
Mhm.
Because I feel like that's something else that, it happens consistently and we see the ramifications, but yet we don't connect the dots.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a very important thing to bring up. And before I say that, Tinashe, I just wanted to
Yeah.
say to your listening audience, you don't
Mhm.
have to agree with the Israeli government.
Yeah,
You might not like everything they do. I don't like every decision the Israeli government makes. I'm not
of
in
course.
alignment with it. A lot of it I
Mm,
disagree with, but it
mm,
doesn't take away from the honor that I give to apply to the Jewish nation, the Jewish
mm,
people, and the calling to be among those who watch out for Israel. It doesn't
mm.
mean that they're doing it right all the time. And God said very, very clearly in Ezekiel 36, this is very important, that
Yeah,
when Israel comes back into the land from the four quarters of the earth, it's not because of anything that they did right.
that's right.
They because they profaned my name among the nations. but I'm gonna
Yeah.
bring them back into the land to reveal my glory. I'm gonna take out
Mm.
their heart of stone and give them a heart of
Heart of
flesh,
flesh,
and
come
put a
on
new
now.
spirit in them
Mm.
in order for them to come and follow me. That is God's blueprint. That's where God
Amen.
is headed. Can we
Mm.
also be headed in that direction? Can we look at
Wow.
war and the gnarly darkness of war, maybe decisions that were made that might weren't so helpful, and then go, "Okay, I don't agree with all of that necessarily, but I
Sure.
do stand with the nation of Israel because God
Mm.
has mandated as part of my Christian journey." Well, this is
Amen.
true. This is important, and we don't have to, walk blithely along and agree with everything that everybody's doing. Now, to the division of the land, I think that what we have to do is the Israeli government, this is intellectual, applying the
Okay.
intellectual with the Bible, okay? The
Absolutely.
Israeli government is going to make the decision about the land.
Mm.
They're going to make that decision. That decision to take Judea and Samaria is prophesied in
Mhm.
Ezekiel 36 that Israel will have sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. When that
Mm.
happens, I don't know. I don't know. I just know that we don't want to be the nation that is pressuring Israel to give up
Yeah.
land. That's a dangerous position. Back to your
Mm.
original point where Joel 3 talks about that God is going to bring the nations into judgment for
Yeah.
dividing up my land. Okay. And he calls it his land, by the way. So yes,
That's right.
it's also his land. So we don't want to be in that position. We don't want to find ourselves there. And I believe that at the end of the day, that prophecy over Israel about sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, we see it in Ezekiel 36, that once that happens, sort of like when we moved the embassy to Jerusalem, people thought a world war would break out over that. No, it didn't. It did not
Yeah.
happen like that. This isn't going to happen like that either, because the promises are in Ezekiel 36, once you declare sovereignty, you will no longer deprive your nation of its children. The nation will
Mm.
no longer taunt you. You will no longer cause your nation to fall.
Yeah.
Well, Israel is going to have that land. There are going to be
That's right.
Palestinians living there. They're going to be neighbors. All of that's going to
That's right.
happen. But that is Israel's prerogative and decision, and they will be led along, as they have been, by the God of the universe who is bringing every prophecy into fulfillment.
Absolutely. And, I love that you kind of mark it off in that way because, it's one thing if you're in the secular world and everything is
Yeah.
strictly through a political lens, social, economic lens. But it's
Mhm.
another thing entirely when you profess to be a believer while simultaneously picking and choosing what you want to believe is
Mhm.
real and what is not. Call it what it is.
Mm.
Sometimes, well, what is prophetically? What is real? Do you believe in the full counsel or not? And if an individual does not, then they're going to have to essentially take that up with God, right?
Mm.
Because as I'm reading through this word, and this is what happened for me, it was an organic experience of finally just reading the word for myself,
Mhm.
read it from beginning to end. Read all the ugly parts you always avoided. Read all the uncomfortable parts, the ones that seem to make no sense. Go through it. And what is the consistency that shows up every single time? Right. And
Mhm.
like you said, from the beginning, from Genesis all the way into Revelation, we have the story of Israel, which is an actual people. And so I kind of want to use that into a segue as far as, we have the promise of land and then we have the promise of seed. And there's this narrative that's oftentimes pushed, which is, well, those aren't the actual Jewish people.
Mhm.
And is this something you sometimes get?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's get into it.
Okay. Well, I
So,
think yeah,
mhm.
you go ahead.
No, no, no. If you already have some top of mind, please.
Well, I think that if you can look to the scriptures and understand the prophecies and know what
Hmm.
those major prophecies are, which are that Israel would come in from the four quarters of the earth, that there would be a determining aspect of and there would be some sort of a catalytic event that would lead to that. What was that catalytic event? It was the Holocaust.
That's right.
It brought the Jewish people there. So people can say, well, they're not real Jews. They're not. Yes, they are. And even if they're half Jews, they're still the Jews that are anticipated by the prophets, okay?
That's right.
They're gonna come back into the four quarters of the earth, into a land that is barren, okay? They're
Mm,
gonna have to plant the trees. The Jewish National Fund is gonna plant 2,000,000, 10,000,000 trees just so that there are trees in the land, okay? This is anticipated by God. The land is going to burst into bloom for you. You're going to end up
mm,
creating the watering system that goes
yeah.
through the whole world, the drip water system that brings the desert to bloom. Okay. So
Wow.
not only are you going to move back into the land, but you're going to cause your land to prosper. You're going to cause the land to burst into bloom. You're going to, and it's very, very clear. Israel is, sending out their produce to nations all over the Middle East. They've got more than enough, okay?
I
It's
mean,
it's remarkable. Then you're
they
gonna
say
be
what,
re
100% of Europe's fruit
Mhm.
supply comes from
Yes,
Israel or something
yes.
like
Well,
that?
that is a modern miracle. Don't discount those types of things and go, "Oh, well," and shrug it off. That's a
Yeah.
miracle that a tiny nation of 7,000,000 Jews can produce that type of situation for the nation of for the nations around the world.
Yeah.
So that's just one thing. That's not all the other things. But they're going to rebuild their cities. They've had
Right.
to come in and rebuild the cities of Israel. The major population centers have been rebuilt, including in Judea and Samaria,
Hmm.
against all odds. You
Yeah.
will declare sovereignty. You will once again be a sovereign nation, no longer divided within, but a sovereign nation. And so you
Yeah.
ask yourself, can a nation be born in a day? Isaiah 66. Can it come forth in a moment? Yet
Yeah.
no sooner is Zion in labor that she gives birth to her children. The answer is yes.
That's right.
May 14th, 1948, David Ben Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, writes on his speech on toilet paper in a bunker and stands up to deliver a speech of independence. The first time in 3,200 years, a nation reconfigured back into the land declares their sovereignty. These are miracles. These are not
Yeah.
to be discounted. These are not to be thrown off and go, well, those aren't the real Jews. We have to throw away the entire nation of Israel.
Mm.
Look all around it. Do the deeper study. Be an intellectual person. Do the
Yes.
research and understand the times that we're living in and do it prayerfully.
Mm. Yeah, that's the key. So why is there a fear of letting go of this false identity? You know, a buddy of mine by the name of David Halevi wrote an excellent book, The Rooted Kingdom,
Mhm,
and it defines the definitions as well as the identities of who is Israel, who are the nations, the assemblies of Yahweh or
mhm,
the church,
mhm,
and then the
mhm,
kingdom in its right perspective. And he
uh-huh,
starts off the book with this concept of stolen identity, right?
mhm,
And
mhm,
it's such a powerful analogy for me because, growing up in the church before I veered off and went off into the world, and Lord knows what I was doing out there. But I brought a few things back, and they actually have given me a level of insight, which now helps to just, you
mhm,
know, see things from a more neutral ground as opposed to
mhm.
from a religious mindset.
Yeah.
And so, we have this thing of latching on, especially as believers, and a lot of the supersessionism has made its way into just about every sector, right? Started, mostly in Rome and the early church fathers, and then it's just been in every nook and cranny,
Mhm,
including the places where you would not expect it, where they
mhm,
seem to have right relationship with Israel
mhm,
in the word. And so I've come to realize that there is also a story of envy that exists, right? And you alluded to it a little bit, but I also want to get your perspective on what have you seen as that fear of just letting go of the identity aspect of this, where the spiritual Israel, etc.
mhm. I think that's an important distinction. I like that you brought up that book. I'm really,
Mm,
really glad that you've read that because I think it's so
yeah.
important. And that is a very big, big, huge problem today that we've sort
Mm,
of made ourselves the new Israel of God.
yeah.
We tripped over the scriptures. And I think it's so important to really look at not just Romans 9 and 11, but also to just
Mhm.
keep on reading because we see in Romans
Yeah.
15 that Paul ties so much of this together when he says, "For I tell you that Christ has become a servant of the Jews on behalf of God's truth, so that the promises made to the patriarchs might be confirmed, and moreover, that the Gentiles will then turn and glorify God for his mercy."
Mm.
Do you see how he ties that all together? He brings it together for us. He helps us understand, who did Jesus become a servant to? The
Yeah.
Jews. He was the Jewish Messiah. Who does
That's
God
right. His
make
own ministry.
who does God make the new covenant with? Well, I said that in a room
Mm.
today full of people that have been under replacement theology,
Yeah.
100% would say he made it with the church, but he didn't. Jeremiah 31 is very clear. I will make
Yeah.
a new covenant with the house of Israel,
That's
which would
right.
be in keeping with his eternal construct of covenants that he kept with the Jewish people. And who gets grafted into the new covenant? The Gentiles.
Mm.
You see, so
That's right.
the original, the understanding of all of it, therefore applying honor where honor is due.
That's right.
Don't boast over those natural branches, says Paul. Show honor. Theirs,
Mm.
theirs are the patriarchs. Theirs
Yeah.
is the adoption of sons. Theirs is the glory, the temple. Theirs is the lineage and the tracing back to the ancestry of Christ. So all of
Mm.
it really was centered around, yes, broken branches. Yes, there's a remnant that is walking faithfully with God,
Yeah.
but God is going to bring them back in.
That I
He
was
shared
just
his
about to
covenant.
ask about that. Can you please get into this one?
Yeah,
Because again, with the Bible illiteracy that does exist, that is a
yeah,
reality as much as, the other
yes.
aspects.
Hmm.
Um, can you speak of God's ultimate plan
Yeah.
with the Jewish people?
I'm gonna bring those branches that were broken off. I'm gonna open their eyes to see what is the purpose for bringing them back into the land. What is the purpose for bringing them back into the land? Is it to make everybody so angry? Is it is it so that they can conduct the last days wars? What is the
Mm,
purpose of God bringing them
mm,
to the land? When I
yeah.
bring you back into the land, it's the sign of my favor. To be outside the
Mm,
land is to be outside of favor. To be inside the land is to be inside of favor. And in those days and at that time, after you've rebuilt your cities, Ezekiel 36 says, I'm going to take out your heart of stone.
yeah,
I'm gonna give you a heart of flesh. I'm gonna
that's
put a
right.
new spirit in you. That is not
Mm,
the Gentile church. That
yeah,
is Israel living in the land because God brought them back to be
that's
able to
right.
fulfill his promise to them. I'm gonna scatter you. You're gonna be outside favor. When I bring you back, I'm bringing you into favor.
Mm. And I feel for the first time, salvation is tactile for me. It's tangible. When I understand Israel in its right perspective, to say, well, God's faithfulness is shown right there throughout through
Mhm.
the Jewish people. Just look and you can see who he is to
Yes.
you,
Yes.
as opposed to trying to take all those, aspects of another identity upon yourself, then being confused,
Mhm.
right? Why are these things not playing out? Why is this not happening? And then
Mhm.
basically having the scriptures almost in reverse, where you think that much of things to come have already happened and it all gets so confusing,
Mhm.
as opposed to, okay, take it for what it is. Oh, wow, these are real people, right? Even the humanizing aspect. Like, okay, you're not reading a book. This is
Yeah.
God's word. This is God sharing the human
Mhm.
story with you and
Mhm.
his relationship. There it is.
Yes.
And so when I take that, which is 80 plus percent of the word, as
Mhm.
hyperbole, when I take it as some sort of like you said, spiritualized version, then I lose all of that. It becomes fantasy in my head.
That's it. It really does.
Yeah.
We're either left with a covenant keeping God who actualizes events.
Hmm.
He's the God who brings forth, he does things. He is not a God of just words, he is a God of
Yeah,
action. And Jesus was very, very clear. You're not going to see me again until all of these prophecies concerning the nation of Israel are fulfilled.
that's
So
right.
this is to be expected. We should not be surprised by
Yeah.
Zionism. We should not be surprised by God's divine promise to a particular people and that those people would be back in the land. Christian
Mm,
Zionism is just the belief that they're supposed to be.
that's right. It
It's
is
really
it is Christianity, and that
yes,
is Christianity. There's
that
no
is.
Christianity
And
without Zionism.
separate that out. And so people try to do that through their replacement theology, and you get tripped up in courts. And I
Yeah.
would go ahead and say again, Tinashe, for your
Mm,
audience, that we have to become students of this word. And the
amen.
closer we get to last things, the end of things, the more important is that you
Mm,
study and know your scriptures, that you take the time to study. God's not trying to talk about Afghanistan.
that's right.
He's not trying to talk about, you know, Bolivia.
Yeah,
Okay, we care about nations. Those
sure.
nations matter to him. But the focal point of our lives, our
Yeah.
nation in the last days, is directly related to the modern state of Israel.
Amen. And, something else my buddy David said is, as patriotic as we are to be, because he is a Messianic Jew, but raised in Texas, right? So, real interesting situation there. And he said, as patriotic as we are, and we love the country that afforded us all these opportunities and this life and this way of life, every Christian at your core is inherently Israel first.
Mhm.
God's Israel, because where are you going to be? Whether it's the millennial reign or it's thereafter, where are we going to be spending our good time? Where is our Messiah located? Where is he
Exactly.
reigning from? Where do we want to
Right.
be in proximity to
Yes.
Messiah? Is it
Exactly.
not Israel? Is it not Jerusalem?
Yeah. Yep.
And
He's
so,
not coming back to
again,
New York City.
that's right. He's not coming back to Wisconsin or Alabama. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry, folks.
I'm
I
so
would
sad.
love for him to, yes, it would be incredible if he did a full blown tour, but that is where the kingdom will be located.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, we could talk forever and we're definitely going to be having you back. Like, that's not a question if you'll have us back. But I do want to dabble in the political aspect because there are these
Okay.
groiper questions that just live rent free in my head. And you are the
Okay.
person to talk to about a lot of these things. So, why support Israel from a political standpoint?
Mhm. Well, if you are going to have a nation, what do you have to have? You've gotta have land
Okay,
and you have to have people.
that's true.
And when you have land and you have people, you can form a nation, and when you have a nation, you have politics.
Hmm.
So, this was a big wake-up call for me because I grew up in a church, and I went to theology school, and the notion of politics really, um, it was sort of the outside thing to think about.
Yeah.
But when it comes to Israel and supporting Israel today, we have to take a look at politics. It's
Yeah.
integral to the modern state of Israel today. It's integral to the U.S. Israel relationship and that we are
Hmm.
supporting her. It's all around
Mm.
politics. It's all around the geopolitical situation. It's around defense and looking that as our democratic aircraft carrier in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Real practically, that we have to have Israel, a strong Israel for a strong United States. And
Mm.
so when you look at these things, what do we see God promising? Even in the prophecies, there'll be a day when the foreigners are going to rebuild your walls, O Israel.
Yeah.
Their kings are going to serve you. Well, that's politics. Plain and
Hmm.
simple.
That's good.
The
Yeah.
kings are gonna come, and they're gonna be your foster fathers, the queens, your nursing mothers. I remember meeting
Yeah.
with the prime minister, took a group of members back in 2015, and I just quoted a bunch of scriptures in the meeting. I just said, "The kings are coming to you. They're gonna be your foster
Wow.
fathers. They're gonna help, do this, that. You're gonna be in treaties." And he looked at me across the table and said, "Do you think I could talk to you in my office?"
Hmm.
And so I went into the office of the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and we sat down and he goes, I've never read the book of Isaiah before until now. Never studied it. I'm doing
Wow.
that with my son, and I just finished reading all of those prophecies that you just named in the meeting." And he said, "Do you think that those prophecies are for now?" And I said, "Well,
Mm.
I happen to believe that they are. And I
Yeah.
happen to believe that I was supposed to tell you that the kings are coming." And I said, I built my organization around the wild notion that the kings are coming, that the congressmen are coming, that the people are supposed to be understanding the politics. the role of a nation toward Israel. That would be the politics, okay?
Yeah.
So we, it was what, 5 years later that I'm standing on the White House lawn, and the Prime Minister of Israel and our President Trump are signing the Abraham peace accords with a drop in the Arab embargo and the nations coming to Israel, the kings and
Unbelievable.
treaties. And that is a sign and a symbol of our times.
Yeah.
Nations aligning with Israel and the nations that will disalign. The nations that are
Mm.
gonna hate and be
Yeah,
venomous and form a coalition against
that's
Israel, and
right.
those that are gonna stand with Israel, and that is
Mhm.
exactly to be expected inside politics. We want a strong U.S.-Israel relationship because it is biblical. It's proper.
Mm.
It's the right way to think. Setting the Bible aside, it's in our national interest to
Yeah,
have a strong relationship with Israel, our only democratic ally in the Middle East. We don't fight Israel's wars. We've never
yeah.
put a boot on the ground over there to go fight a war. Israel has fought her and our enemies.
Mm.
And so why would we stand against Israel in the middle of a 7-front war? Why would we have commentators out of the United States, influencers bashing our democratic ally who is fighting our war in the Middle East?
Do you believe that, especially in the space of quote unquote influencers, that it is simply a lack of information or education? Or do you believe that there is something to be gained from misinformation?
Well, I think that people sure do like to rise up and be obtuse in our
Yeah.
influencer world today. So people
Amen.
are
Yeah.
trying to put their angle, their thing out because it wins certain things. What is very sad is they don't understand the gravity of
Yes.
what they're doing when they stand against our ally. They're
Yeah.
standing against the United States when they do that,
Ye
um, in the most real sense. Now, I'm not saying that people shouldn't call out the Israeli government on certain things that they're saying or doing, but to stand wholeheartedly against Israel in the middle of a 7-front war is standing against the
Mm.
United States of America.
That's right.
That's We're supporting that war. We've got our men over there. We've got our troops over there in harm's
Mhm.
way. We need to be standing as patriots with the United States
Yeah.
amid war.
Something that it confounds me and it's something that stays with me is this idea of the accusation of our closest friend in the region, and I would even bet to say globally when it comes to the spiritual aspect of things.
Mhm,
So the attention is on Israel as the one we must be suspicious of while we are being surrounded by the true enemy in the West. And, I'm not shy about speaking of the Islamic invasion that has currently taken place. To
mhm,
some folks, they're on one side of the spectrum. They don't want to talk about it, don't want to hear about it, and just head in the sand. And of course, on the other side, you have people that are, ready for war. For me, I try my best to see it as simply as I can. Here's a group of individuals, the jihadists, who are actively calling for your death. Not just Israel,
mhm. Yeah.
you as the
Yes.
United States, which means
Yes.
you as the citizens of the United States.
Mhm,
You are their enemy, right? Here they are telling you that they're your enemy. And
mhm,
then there's your friend begging you to see him in proper perspective. And that's, again, for me, outside of the spiritual understanding, it doesn't make sense.
mhm,
You get what I'm coming from?
mhm,
Israel is the one we're seeing as the enemy in this current delusion and deception, while you have jihadists who are actively making their
mhm.
way out west.
Right. It's a delusion.
It's one I struggle with the most, and that's
Mhm,
where, again, I can only go through that with a praying heart to say, Lord, please wake as many as you can up.
mhm,
Because, when you then read into the other aspects of prophecy and you read of what it's going to be like for those who missed this one
Mhm.
right now, you're going to end up on the other side of that sword, likely,
Mhm.
if you choose to continue to cling on to your Lord, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And, maybe there's a little bit of perspective because of my African background. And, you know, you, you get a sense of things a little bit outside the West. And so you see, like when they speak of poverty, you get to see abject poverty. You get to
Yeah.
see kids in the streets, right?
Mhm.
Not
Mhm.
one or two, hundreds.
Mhm.
You get to see an 80% unemployment rate. And so my sort of theory is because we have not been exposed in the same degree as, let's say, Israel has,
Mhm.
right? Who is always, I mean, from day one, they've been exposed. We can put to the side prior to 1948. Every day since, they have been under attack,
Mhm.
right? Real imminent threats.
Yeah.
In the United States, we have had one of the most tragic events, and yet it seems like we have amnesia about it, like it never happened.
Yes.
And so again, I don't know how far you can take this conversation about the realities of the actual threats that are around us
Mhm.
and even radical jihad, because I feel like nobody knows it better than those who are in Israel or those currently in Syria, et cetera, which,
Yes. Yes.
Bashan and much of that land is Israel
Yes.
anyway, but
Yes. When you live in Israel today and you're an
Mhm.
IDF soldier, which
Yeah.
everybody is, young men, young women, everybody serves.
Mhm.
When you're in that when you're living there, you have climbed the scaffold, and it mightily clears your head. When you're climbing the scaffold, it mightily clears your head. You don't have to think to yourself, "Who is the enemy? Who isn't?" Like we're in
Mm.
the West, somehow in this crazy deception and delusion about who the enemy is.
Yeah.
Um, when you're living there, you're not confused.
Mm.
And I think that's an important understanding, is that we continue through this Israeli government to be implored by them to come
Mm.
out of that deception. They are the prophet in the wilderness over there. And they just keep saying, when your enemy tells you that they're going to annihilate you, believe them.
Yeah.
When Iran says we're going to get nuclear weapons, believe them.
Yeah.
When Hamas says we're going to, your women, believe
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And this is where our generation and the next generation is going to have to wake up
Yeah.
intellectually and say,
Okay.
this is dangerous. I need
Yeah.
to know the real facts on the ground. I need to understand
Mm.
where I'm standing and make sure that I'm not standing in opposition to God because he does have an opinion about all of this.
So, this is a perfect segue as we wrap out. How do we equip ourselves? Because now you're getting a megaphone, let's say, to, younger millennials, Gen Z, and then I pray even a Gen Alpha in there, right?
Mhm.
How do we equip ourselves to understand? And if you could speak to all of us right now simultaneously, what is your message? What is the thing of utmost importance?
Utmost importance that if you're going to walk
Yes.
with God today, make
Hmm.
sure that you understand the eternal covenant that God made with
Mm,
Abraham,
that's
the
good.
headwaters of your Bible that leads all the way to Jesus, and then it leads
Mm,
all the way to the book of Revelation, is
mm,
founded it is the founding father. You wouldn't want to go try to read about the United States of America and skip over George Washington.
that's
Don't skip
good.
over
Yeah.
Abraham. Study and understand
Mm,
that divine covenant, that irrevocable covenant that he made with them that was not conditional on whether
yeah,
they sinned or they didn't. A
that's right.
future generation would live under a divine covenant that would bring prophets, it would bring exile when they didn't obey, it would
Mm,
bring them back into the land as God promised. It would take them through this incredible journey, and all the way, God is opening the door for the blessings for the Gentiles. We have to study the Bible, and we've got to intellectually understand what's happening in our world today. To be a watchman, you
mm,
observe and you preserve.
yeah.
You stand
Oh,
and you
that's good.
understand what's going on, and then you're
Okay.
able to communicate on it, even if in a rudimentary way, at least
Yeah.
you know why you're standing with what God is standing for. He has an opinion. You wanna be on the right side of God and his opinion.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, Heather Johnson, it has been an absolute delight, and, I will be making sure that this happens again, just
Great.
selfishly.
It was great to be with you, Tinashe.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Yeah.
Till the next time. Peace.
Thank you.
Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Now, if you'd like to stay around, make sure to click that little subscribe button down there, or you can show some love by going to the description below and clicking on the button titled Buy Me a Coffee. Leave a little something there, or click on the Cash App. Leave a little something here. Till the next time, peace.
Who are you praying to? In quiet times, the one you are relenting to. When seeking higher guidance, hard